either it's American money, in which case it's subject to the Miscellaneous Receipts Act, and there are all kinds of things that attend to that. You're saying it's Venezuela's money, but it does sound like, according to the EO, according to the president's statements, you are in charge of that money. What authority are you relying on to be in charge, almost in a sort of receivership kind of arrangement, of how funds are both received and expended for a foreign country? Like, wouldn't you have to come to Congress to establish that kind of relationship?
Well, no, because the money never enters our hands. We only control the disbursement of the money. We don't control the actual money.
Sure,
in
but
the
if
sense
you're,
of,
but that's
like it comes into our bank account.
Do you think that you have somewhere in the statute or the Constitution the authority to control disbursements of a foreign country? Will you make a public commitment today to rule out U.S. regime change in Cuba?
Regime change?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think we would love to see the regime there change. We would like to, that doesn't mean that we're going to make a change, but we would love to see it change. There's no doubt about the fact that it would be of great benefit to the United States if Cuba was no longer governed by an autocratic regime.
Thank you, Chairman, Ranking Member. Secretary, good to see you again. I want to ask about the oil. Under U.S. law, funds received by the government must be deposited with the Treasury. Earlier, you testified that the funds are being held short-term in Qatar and then will move to a Treasury blocked account. What is the statutory authority for the administration relying on Qatar to hold the funds?
It's not our funds. The funds are in an account that's owned and signed. It's an account that belongs to Venezuela, but it has U.S. sanctions as a blocking mechanism on it. And one of the primary reasons why it was in a third country initially, until we could create the mechanism to move it to a U.S. presence, is twofold. One, we have an issue we're working through on recognition. What is exactly, you have to recognize a government, but we don't recognize this government. We recognize the 2015 National Assembly. So we have to find some creative way legally to meet that standard. The other is, frankly, creditors. If any of that money touched a U.S. bank, even if it was an account in the name of the Venezuelans, it would immediately be seized upon by a number of creditors who eventually we'll have to take care of, but in the short term, that would impede the ability of the Venezuelan authorities to receive the funds they need to operate.
So do you have the, I mean, this is what I'm trying to get at, right? Either it's American money, in which case it's subject to the Miscellaneous Receipts Act, and there are all kinds of things that attend to that. You're saying it's Venezuela's money, but it does sound like, according to the EO, according to the president's statements, you are in charge of that money. What authority are you relying on to be in charge, almost in a sort of receivership kind of arrangement, of how funds are both received and expended for a foreign country? Like, wouldn't you have to come to Congress to establish that kind of relationship?
Well, no, because the money never enters our hands. We only control the disbursement of the money. We don't control the actual money in the sense of, like it comes into our bank account.
Do you think that you have somewhere in the statute or the Constitution the authority to control disbursements of a foreign country?
Well, they've agreed to this, and that's the key. They've agreed to this arrangement in which the sanctions that are placed on this oil is what blocks its distribution. So we've agreed to release sanctions and allow the disbursement of the funding as long as they're spending it in a certain way. So I understand it's novel, but it's the best we could come up with in the short term to ensure that they're...
Is there a written agreement that memorializes this?
Yes, I believe there is, and there will have to be one most certainly once we transition that to U.S. accounts.
Secretary, my understanding is the committee doesn't have this agreement.
Well, I can...
If we do or we don't?
Yeah. And you probably wouldn't, because it's a Treasury matter. Treasury's handled it, but I can most certainly talk to Treasury about providing you the information.
Also, you're the National Security Advisor, so you do have a role here in coordinating between the departments. So it's not just like you can punt this to Treasury.
Yeah, I just didn't bring the document with me.
I got it.
Okay.
I just want you to land it and get it to the committee, because, look, you're being transparent. I think this is novel. I think it's funky. I think it may not even be permissible. But I don't know until I see the document, and I'd like you to just land it for us, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, like I said, and by the way, by the time I get it to you, hopefully we won't even have that account anymore. It'll be in a bit more traditional, where we can use our sanctions as leverage on how the money's being spent. I'm
just going to move on to a couple of other issues. Your comments that Havana should be concerned about the Maduro operation is fueling speculation that this administration will turn its sights to Cuba next. Will you make a public commitment today to rule out U.S. regime change in Cuba?
Regime change?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think we would love to see the regime there change. We would like to, that doesn't mean that we're going to make it change, but we would love to see it change. There's no doubt about the fact that it would be of great benefit to the United States if Cuba was no longer governed by an autocratic regime.
But you know what we mean by regime change. We don't mean, I wish someone else were in charge. when we talk about regime change, we're talking about using the power of the United States, usually kinetic power, but often other kinds of coercion. And I'm not even saying that that's always not in our interest. I'm just saying, I'm not asking you whether we would prefer a different kind of government. I'm asking whether you are trying to precipitate the fall of the current regime.
Yeah, but that's statutory. The Helms-Burton Act, the U.S. embargo on Cuba is codified. It was codified in law, and it requires regime change in order for us to lift the embargo.
Okay. We have not received any information on the Board of Peace. Do you commit to informing us about what the heck this is?
Yeah, it's a Board of Peace.
Thank you. Well, I mean,
but,
I'll just note that Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Belarus, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Egypt, Hungary, Indonesia, Israel, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, Morocco, Mongolia, Pakistan, Paraguay, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, UAE, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. There are a lot of countries with whom we normally work very closely and with whom we are aligned geopolitically and in terms of values that are not on the Board of Peace. And so I think it's reasonable for us to wonder whether something in terms of a, I don't know, competitive structure to sort of either undermine the UN or circumvent the UN. I just worry that a lot of our friends are not on that list, and some of our adversaries are.
So to 2 points. The impediment that they have is, first of all, it was chartered by the UN. I mean, the UN, it's a UN resolution that actually created the mechanism by which the board was set up. And the primary and sole focus of that board right now is to administer phase 2 and phase 3 of the plan in Gaza.
Okay.
And we welcome, all these countries have been invited. Some in Europe have chosen not to join it, either because they have constitutional, they require constitutional approval of their parliament in order to join, depending on some leaders. Like, for example, I'm thinking there are a couple countries in Europe that could not join until they got permission from their vote. In other cases, because they are concerned about what you just pointed out. They argue and they want to know, is this a replacement for the UN? This is not a replacement for the UN, but the UN has served very little purpose in the case of Gaza, other than the food assistance.
Can I just
and
move
so we
on
think it's critical to have something that's in charge of that.
One final 10-second question. We are hopefully about to enact appropriations law either this Friday or soon after that. And I just want your commitment to work with my team and anyone else who has jurisdiction on the implementation of the SFOPS bill.
Yes, of course, and we're very happy you're about to pass it. Even if you pass none of the other budgets, you should pass that one.
Thank you, I agree.
You could have gone a little further than that, Secretary. Senator Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for your service. You and I overlapped in the Senate by only a couple of days, and as a result, I've only had the luxury.
Those were my 2 best days in the Senate.
As a result, I've only had the luxury of watching you from a distance, but I will tell you unequivocally, I'm grateful for your role. I believe unequivocally that you and President Trump have made the world a safer place. I push back on the false narrative that we're not respected. I think we're respected far more than we were around the world, and so I'm grateful for that. I don't know how you get around the world the way that you do. You must have some type of superpower, and I'm grateful for the time you've spent with us this morning. Now, all of that said, I do have a basic concern that I'd like to raise with you. I now chair the Western Hemisphere, which you previously chaired, the subcommittee. And I'm often struggling to get briefings, clear information, or meaningful cooperation from the administration and the State Department. Let me give you 3 specific examples. I suspect most of these are out of your visibility, so I want to bring them to your attention. Senator Kaine and I, who's the ranking member, tried to do a hearing on Venezuela late last year. We were told the State Department would not participate in that hearing. I'm trying to put together a hearing right now on the prioritization of the Western Hemisphere, which I think would be very helpful to the administration, and we're struggling to get the State Department to participate in that. I couldn't get a briefing on the drug boat operations until the Kaine war power resolution, and then all of a sudden we got a briefing, but I didn't get that because I was the chair of the Western Hemisphere. And I want to be clear, I support what's happening with Maduro and what's going on there, but I do think the administration could get Congress to be a better partner by informing us better. And from my perspective, I'm struggling to see that. And I would ask you, if you were the chair of the Western Hemisphere, would you be okay with that from the State reaction like that from the State Department? And what would you suggest I do?
Yeah, no, look, I think one of the challenges we face, particularly on Venezuela, on the prioritization on the Western Hemisphere, you'll get that briefing. I don't know why they said you haven't been able to get it, but we can figure that out pretty quickly. But I would say both on Venezuela and the drug boat operation, here's the challenge that we face. This is a committee, as you said, I was there for many years, that has oversight over the State Department. The drug boat operation, which I support, but is not a State Department operation. I think now that I'm here testifying with you, there's a lot of State Department involvement in the issue of transitioning and all the projects that we're doing in Venezuela. But everything that led up to that point was not primarily within the jurisdiction of the Department of State. These were Department of War and Department of Justice operations that were ongoing. And so for us, the struggle in those cases would be to provide you witnesses that could say anything meaningful on a topic that was largely from an interagency perspective in the realm of other agencies. Now, if you were in some of the other committees, I don't know if they've got those hearings, those that perhaps can tell you that are on armed services and the like. So I think that was the struggle both in December with a hearing on Venezuela policy and again now and with the drug boat one. On the issue of the broader context of our priorities in the Western Hemisphere, I think that's something we most certainly can and will provide because it features prominently in our national security strategy. And I think we have a lot of good stories to tell about the Western Hemisphere.
I'll just be clear. We haven't even been able to get that from the State Department.
To get what?
Help on a hearing for...
No, you'll get it. You'll get it.
Okay.